Honorable Speaker, it is really, it is an unfortunate practice that we bury our dead on shallow graves and expose them to be mutilated, the dead bodies to be mutilated by wild animals. And we want, the African culture is to the extent that it respects the dead. And Honorable Speaker, it is unfortunate that when we expect our dead to rest, they don't rest in their graves and their bodies are mutilated by wild animals. Honorable Speaker, it is an important motion that has been brought by the Honorable Member for Langata. And Honorable Speaker, I rise to support this and urge the government to get alternative burial site. That notwithstanding, Honorable Speaker, it is an environmental hazard, because when we have bodies that decompose in the estates where people live, Honorable Speaker, it is a problem even to our children. It is a problem when we have stench of our own dead coming from the backyards where we live, Honorable Speaker. It is important, Honorable Speaker, that this matter is expedited as fast as it should, Honorable Speaker. Even without doing environmental assessment, we should have a cessation of taking more bodies to Langata, Honorable Speaker. Kenya is a land of plenty, Honorable Speaker, and I should think that we can always get alternative burial site. And better still, if we can get it and secure it, have it fenced and well taken care of, but somewhere outside the city. Honorable Speaker, it would be appropriate, it would allow our dead to rest in peace, but it would also allow members of the bereaved family to be able, Honorable Speaker, to visit their dead, Honorable Speaker. I rise, Honorable Speaker, also to say that it is important that we have more than one site. We only have Langata, but if we could even have as many as 10 burial sites to take care of our dead so that there is no congestion, Honorable Speaker, I think it would be a good thing for us to do, Honorable Speaker. We have enough land. It is just putting aside land for relevant use, Honorable Speaker. I thank you.
Honorable Rindikiri Mugambi, member for Buri.
Thank you, Madam, for giving this opportunity to contribute to this motion brought about by my Member of Parliament, because I reside in Langata. Madam Speaker, it is true that this cemetery is overutilized, and according to the African customs, we cannot exhume a body by either dialect or dialect, so that we create a space to bury somebody else. Madam Speaker, you are aware that this is the cemetery saga that led to the former PS and the chairman of Nairobi then County Council to be put into jail. Madam Speaker, the population in Nairobi is increasing. There are the slums. There are people who don't know where they come from. There are those people who are now permanently settled in Nairobi with no intentions of going back to the rural areas. It's therefore important that this matter of where to rest our beloved people is addressed as a matter of national importance. Madam Speaker, the expenditures of transporting bodies to the rural areas, because there is no space at Langata Cemetery, is really causing strain, particularly to the urban poor. Madam Speaker, the government has a responsibility of taking up this load of providing adequate burial space. Madam Speaker, we are aware that it poses security risk also. Madam Speaker, Langata Cemetery is where many of the criminals reside, particularly at night. Why? Because it's not very well secured. 2, it is very unclean with the bushes. 3, Madam Speaker, there are some criminals who have taken the coffins to be their homes at night. Madam Speaker, I think we need to be seen to be a very serious country. Article 60, it says how we need to dispose the bodies of our loved ones, how we need to dignify even the dead. Madam Speaker, as you drive along Langata Road, you always see hyenas crossing over to Langata Cemetery at as early as 7 p.m. And you ask yourself, where are they going? If actually are very careful, you'll notice that they are entering Langata Cemetery to feast on the life, on the bodies of our loved ones, and they know when there's fresh barriers taken place. Madam Speaker, I support this motion and urge that it is time the government takes this matter very seriously, together with Nairobi County. The government is busy putting up houses, but we have no provision for burial site in those houses. The governor of Nairobi is busy putting up other facilities, but he seems to have forgotten that we need cemeteries in this town. Madam Speaker, I think it's the high time that each constituency in this county is given an opportunity to have a cemetery wherever they are going to have it, so that the members of parliament from each constituency will say, we have a certain area allocated for our constituency, so that we can go and bury our people. Members of parliament are taking a lot of responsibilities, Madam Speaker, on behalf of non-performing the government of Nairobi County and the national government at the same time. So I urge the Ministry of Ranch, the ministry in charge of county government, the governor himself, he should take full responsibility of the mess that is taking place at Langata Cemetery. I therefore support this motion and say thank you very much, my member of parliament, because I'm your member of parliament. I'm waiting for you to call me so that you can give me my bursary. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Before we hear more horror stories from the MP and residents of Langata, allow me to introduce pupils in the gallery, public gallery. Regis View Academy from Naivasha, from my own county of Nakuru County. On my own behalf, join me in the House. Welcome to observe the proceedings of the House. The next speaker will be the member for Mandera West, Honorable Adan Haji. Not in the House. Member for Tharaka, Honorable Gitonga Morugara.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this motion by the Honorable Felix Odiwo, alias Jalango. He's a well-known legislator in the country and a media personality. A little history about the Langata Cemetery is that, in fact, it's the only cemetery that was set aside since the advent of colonialism for burial rituals. As you know very well, Africans were not burying their dead, and therefore it does not surprise many when we hear that hyenas are feasting on dead bodies, because that was the norm those days. Dead bodies were recipe for hyenas. If you carefully look at the Langata Cemetery, it was segregated as it were at that time. There was a section for the Europeans, a section for the Asians, and the Africans were given the far-flung corner where not many bodies were buried anyway those days. And the first to be overused was the European section, because Asians could cremate from time to time, while Europeans were actually burying their dead. Eventually, Africans were brought into the practice of burials, and because they were larger in number, it has now overstripped the size of the land available for those burials. What the Europeans do today, and I have witnessed this, is they reuse their graves, which is common with the European culture, such that if the father died long time ago, followed by the mother and the children, they may all be buried in one grave just by recouping the soil and burying the dead. The Asians have taken up mostly to cremation, while the Africans now are actually overstretching the piece of land that was available to them, as a result of which there are no procedures. And if there are procedures, they are not well planned. This is why we now have the shallow graves into which you put the bodies, and if you're not careful, two things happen. Hyenas will feast on the dead bodies, where possibly the coffins are not very well done. If you use a very good coffin in Langata Cemetery, you got to be careful, because the following day, you may find the body of your relative actually outside, because some thief snitched the coffin when you were fast asleep. This is quite common. These are the horror stories we hear from Langata. But what is most important is for the government to relook at the issue of cemeteries, because we do have other towns that are nearby, which possibly have areas and lands which can be set aside for burial places, so that we are able to give our dead people dignified send-off. Kiambu is one of such towns. I know for sure there was a time there was hue and cry regarding grabbing of the cemetery land in Kiambu, and there is an interesting story told about an MP who defected in the 90s. He was rewarded with a piece of land, which eventually was traced into the cemetery of Kiambu. This is exactly how uncaring we are as regards how we treat dead people, that we can actually give out land set aside for them, as a result of which we all go to Langata to crowd the place, try to bury people in a manner that is not well planned, in a manner that is not dignified, which is totally un-African. As I sum up, we should extend the planning of gravesites into the countryside. There is a bad practice that happens in the countryside where everybody is trying to cement graves, and the consequence is that it's going to be in 50 years' time, you will have no land, no arable land to cultivate, because you filled your entire land with cemented graves. It's not a good practice. It should be discouraged. The county governments, the national governments should now stand up and have good policies, acceptable policies on burials and grave sites. With those remarks, I do support.
Thank you. The next chance will go to member for Lugari, Honorable Nabuera Nabi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I raise to support the motion by the Honorable Member for Langata. And Madam Speaker, I want from the onset to state that the biggest danger that the ongoings at Langata Cemetery poses is a health hazard that can cause an epidemic never seen before in this country. As we are aware, the cemetery is within a vicinity of an informal settlement. As we are aware, the cemetery is next to an army barrack. As we are aware, most of the graves in that cemetery are already open. Madam Speaker, it is a national catastrophe awaiting to happen. We all know that the city of Nairobi has a problem of drainage, which means anytime we have a lot of rains, bodies are all washed into settlements, they are washed into the Nairobi, in the rivers, and therefore we are causing a health hazard to the populace of Nairobi. Madam Speaker, it is a requirement of World Bank. In fact, I'm worried that World Bank might stop funding the city of Nairobi under KUSIP arrangement. Why? Because one of the requirements is that a city or an urban center which they fund must have a proper symmetry. I would not want to define Langata symmetry as a proper symmetry. Therefore, I'm calling upon the Ministry of Health to close Langata Cemetery and force Nairobi City government to allocate and identify another land and allocate for cemetery if they must continue accessing money under the KUSIP arrangement. Madam Speaker, I want to associate myself with my colleague in also urging that each constituency in Nairobi must have a cemetery of its own. Why? Because of the numbers, because of the population. Madam Speaker, I want to confirm to you that whereas I come from Western Kenya, I've been forced to carry bodies of people who die, who ordinarily, young kids who would ordinarily be buried in a cemetery. But because of a lack of a proper cemetery, they opt to go to carry the body to Western Kenya. Because they fear if the body is buried in Langata Cemetery, one, it may be washed away, it may be eaten by animals. They cannot come and do an annual ceremony as it is in our tradition. Madam Speaker, I will want to give you the most demeaning thing I went through, and this house went through. We lost one of us in this house who was a Muslim. And by nature of the Muslim culture, the burial was immediate. We were standing on bodies, on graves that we have gone to bury our... I mean, it was so demeaning for some of us. I'm calling upon Minister of Lands and Nairobi city government to identify land and allocate and therefore relocate the cemetery of Langata. And I'm calling on the Ministry of Health, under the Public Health Act, to declare Langata Cemetery a health hazard. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The next chance will go to the member for Kilifi North, the Deputy Majority Leader.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much. And I want to congratulate my brother, Felix Odiwar, Papa Jalas, for bringing this motion. Because the people of Langata for a very long time have suffered. Actually, the people of Nairobi have suffered. And the people of Langata bear the brunt of the whole Nairobi because everything is taken there. And it takes a great leader to come up and say, look, I need to solve this problem. And that's why I want to congratulate Papa Jalas for bringing this motion and trying to get a solution for Nairobi, not just for the people of Langata, but for the whole of Nairobi. And God bless you for those kind thoughts for the people of Nairobi. I would like to say that the issue of Langata Cemetery is about planning, land planning. And this country for many, many years has been using land without proper planning. There was a time when colonial masters then planned Nairobi and said, here there will be a cemetery. But thereafter, nobody has thought about planning this city. Things are just being put all over. And that is one of the greatest problems that we have in this country. We have today, there used to be the current Langata Association that had something like building control and zoning. And I think they went to court about issues like that. But after the court, these days you start seeing high-rise buildings coming up in Karen. You start seeing Kilimani used to be a beautiful place to stay. Now everybody is putting up anything everywhere. The problem is land planning. We have actually a department in the Ministry of Lands whose job is just physical planning and land planning, but no one does anything. In the previous government, I remember they were given a budget of around 34 million for a whole year to do land use planning. That is peanuts. That cannot be done. So, Honorable Odiwar, what I would like you to do is sit with the governor of Nairobi. And if the governor of Nairobi cannot sit with you, we'll call him to this house. Because this city belongs to all of us. And planning for this city and ensuring that this city is properly governed is a responsibility of not just the people of Nairobi, but the whole of this country. To ensure that land use planning is done properly and ensure that people are given a decent burial. But the horror stories of Langata are well known. And I think we need to respect the dead. There are those who will have land of their own and bury people in their compound. There are those Kenyans who cannot afford to carry a body up country. They have to bury it here, but they don't have a place to bury. They have to exhume a body. But also I want to give you good news. If you cannot have a place to bury, we can create a place in Kilifi where bodies from Nairobi can be brought for burying. We have enough land, including the Shakahola area. We can give you enough land to do that. But I think this is an important motion, and I think the
Honorable Tandaza, what is out of order?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Is the majority leader in order to suggest that bodies, people dying in Nairobi, should be carried to Kilifi, and yet he knows very well he doesn't have land for such purposes, and knowing very well it will also create a lot of inconvenience for the people of Nairobi. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
No, I'm trying to encourage domestic tourism also for the people of Kilifi. You know, there are many people who will come to Kilifi to do. But seriously, Honorable Speaker, I think this is a serious national issue. I think previous governments who did it in a dishonest way and we lost money, and people tried to buy land in Ukambani and things, you know. But I think this is one of the most honest attempts to ensure that we get another grave site for the people of Nairobi. So I want to thank you, Honorable, and I think I will ask you to sit down with the governor of Nairobi and ensure that the people of Nairobi get a decent send-off when they die. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Member for Embakasi West, Honorable Mark.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support this motion. In Nairobi, Honorable Speaker, I can tell you our population goes up to even 4 million, and even more at times, depending with the seasons. And we can assure you that since Nairobi was founded, the only public cemetery that exists, that is in use today, is in Langata. Now, if we look at the population that we have, and I can give you statistics. I represent Embakasi West, which has a population of about 300,000. I'm aware of Embakasi North, which has about a similar number. Embakasi East, that carries 360,000. Same as Embakasi South, that has about 360,000. Embakasi Central, that has about another 300,000. Kasarani, that has 400,000. Roy Sambu, that has 300,000. All those people who have spoken of constituencies that are on the eastern side of this city, we all go to bury our dead. If we cannot take them up country, we all go to Langata. It is impossible. Those numbers are too high. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, we have land further down towards the end of Nairobi, and we can cross even into the Ukambani area on that end. We who come from that end do not need to bury our dead in Langata. So it falls on us and this house in this time that we can sit and correct the mistakes that have happened for years and decades, that we have refused to plan for this city. Honorable Speaker, I'll be coming up on the next with a motion that will demonstrate how we have failed this city. The failure to plan for our city has led to uncontrolled planning, and that is why the same issue you're seeing in Langata, where you can go and bury somebody, we've been there and we've buried our friends, and you can see an open grave where you can see even the casket itself. That is the most degrading thing that we can do to our departed dead. So, Honorable Speaker, I think it is time. This motion is very timely, and this should not be a matter that should be taken for granted. Past government tried even to buy land. I remember there was, I don't know whether it was in Mavoko, but we were taken round in circles. As much as we say we want to leave this matter to the county of, to the county government of Nairobi, I do not think the county government of Nairobi can handle this matter. That's why I think it is the way the Honorable Jalango has decided to bring this matter to this house. It is important that we support him because Nairobi belongs to all of us. And this should be a matter that we as our government should be able to find land in our surrounding counties. We have Kajiado to the south, we have Machakos, we have Kiambu. Those are the counties that border us. It is important we liaise with them, and this can only be done through the national government. So we are able to find land in those counties and be able to bury our dead in those areas. So with that, Honorable Speaker, I think this motion by the Honorable Jalango is important, and I will support him that it is time that we close Langata Cemetery, but it is important that by the time we close it, because attempts have been there to, and they've tried to close it, but if we do not come up with a solution, we are left with no choice than to bury our dead in Langata. So, Honorable Speaker, I beg to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Kangundo, Honorable Fabian.
Thank you very much, Honorable Madam Speaker, for giving the opportunity to hear my voice on this motion brought by our colleague, Honorable Felix Odwol, aka Jalongo. Honorable Madam Speaker, from onset, I support the motion. And the great philosophers note that the living must take care of the dead. If today we are living, we cannot take care of our brothers and our sisters who are dead. Who are we living for? What are we living for? If you see the scene, and before I continue, I want to send the word of condolences to the brothers and sisters who their parents are lying or their family members are laying in Langata. And may their soul rest in peace. If today you see the happening within the Langata cemetery, you cannot believe the space which is there. You cannot even believe when you go to bury, like one colleague has said, they went to bury their brothers, the other bodies they are there. So immediately you finish putting your body, they remove it, they bring another one. And this is only caused by poor planning. The Nairobi count has not only failed through Langata cemetery. We have seen many happening with this city where there is total failure in terms of planning of the city. People are given right to build the buildings. Then after you finish building your building, it is in the river, it is demolished. People will continue. Even sometimes you see people's building being demolished, but they are being built in the road. Same way as what is happening in Langata. So it is the high time. Not only we are saying we move to the means of earth, it is the high time matters of the land, we put them to the national government rather to keep it to the county government of Nairobi. As we speak, Madam Speaker, we have a very huge disaster coming to Karen. This parliament purported to building a house of 32 floors in Karen. It is as all they approved by the county government of Nairobi. Then you ask them, what brain do you use when you approve some things? Karen is aviation center, that's why we don't have high buildings. Same way Langata has been gazetted as a disaster long time. As we pass there, it is very crazy. You see bodies. It is a body of a human being, not a body of a cow, not a body of a dog. It is lying in capital city of Kenya, openly daylight. And then you see also other people pushing their boat to go bury there. Then they continue to say that they have a planning department in Nairobi. I join my colleague by saying that the Langata cemetery should go to national government. And it's the high time this parliament, we set funds for respect of the dead. We set funds. We buy a land, not only one place, tackling the many corners of Nairobi, because death is within us, and the death we are working with it. So we cannot say that the only option we have is Langata. So, Honorable Madam Speaker, I support, and I say Nairobi City Council planning officers should be in jail for what they are doing to this city. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Dorothy Kiara.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this very important motion by Honorable Oduor, Member of Parliament Langata. Honorable Speaker, I begin with an adage that says that the best brains lie in the cemetery. Indeed, Madam Speaker, we are not just talking about Langata. We are talking about a place where bodies are just dumped in a shallow or permanent grave, depending on one's means or the discretion of the people left behind. We are talking about the next temporary or permanent resident of children, youth, men, women, legislators seated here, Honorable Speaker, when all of us, we exit from this life. Then this begs for the next question, Honorable Speaker. Do dead people have dignity? The Constitution of Kenya, in the Bill of Rights, confers the right to inherent dignity, and that dignity to be respected, and the people who die should be protected. If you walk around Langata Cemetery today, Honorable Speaker, you wonder whether we adhere to this constitution that says even the dead have and deserve dignity. Honorable Speaker, we are perturbed today. We are talking of a place that was set aside by the colonial masters. That means, as a country, we should feel ashamed talking about Langata Cemetery very many years after independence. We have not taken any steps to either improve on the same or continue on where the colonial masters left us. Honorable Speaker, I am saying this with a lot of pain because the people lying at Langata Cemetery and all of us seated here today, whether it will be Langata Cemetery or elsewhere, we shall one day be there, and soon and very soon, because nobody of us has permanent immunity over death. Honorable Speaker, it is the high time that we prepare that final resting place for ourselves when we are still alive. And it is the responsibility of the registrators seated here today. And this is why I say, thumbs up, Honorable Oduor, because you are thinking about yourself. You are thinking about the future generation. And we should not look at the graves and think they are only graves. They are people known to us. Honorable Speaker, when you go to Langata today, you'll find plaques. You'll find every grave as a title and a name. But unfortunately, because of the double allocation of the graves, the person who is buried there is not the person who owns that plaque that is mounted there. Honorable Speaker, I'm saying the county government of Nairobi is obligated to ensure that they take the immediate steps of improving that cemetery now, so that we don't talk about a place that there is nothing we can do about it, whereas we have all the mechanisms that we can use to improve on that particular place. Honorable Speaker, we should also take cognizance of the fact that this place should be well taken care of in terms of this place should have toilets, this place should have places like wash areas, this place should have water points, the bushes must be cleared so that when people go there to check on their loved ones, they have a dignified place where they can go relax and have fine memories of the people who have been put there. Honorable Speaker, I'm saying the county government in the Constitution is also obligated to ensure that they set aside. Honorable Speaker, I can see my time is up, but I'm saying the county government also should set aside areas where people should be buried in dignity.
Thank you, Honorable Dorothy. Your time is up. Member for Alego Usonga, Honorable Samuel Atandi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this motion by Honorable Jalango is a very important motion. It is a fact that Langata Cemetery has reached its capacity. Also, it's a fact that the previous attempts have been made to try to create a new cemetery for Nairobi residents, such which was also highlighted by the MP for Buri, that Nairobi City Council, the defunct Nairobi City Council tried to actually buy land in Machakos County to support the cemetery activities for Nairobi residents. But it became scandalous. And I think EACC has been pursuing those people who are involved in that scandal. Madam Speaker, what I want to say is that it is time Kenyans, and in fact, it is time leaders need to urge Kenyans to pursue various other methods of burying the dead. This type of burying the dead, where ground burial of the dead is outdated. We need to think of other ways. And Madam Speaker, as leadership, we need to champion other methods. Because there's no reason why we have to, carry a casket from here to Suba or to Alego. What is the purpose of doing that? Let us, instead of actually urging, for, creating of more burial sites, let us think of other methods like cremation. Cremation now is very popular, Madam Speaker, and it is very easy. Personally, Madam Speaker, the fact that the Langata Cemetery is full has brought a lot of problems for some of us who come from very traditional families, who represent constituents who are still very traditional, who believe that you must carry a casket from here to Siaya, and their prayers overnight, and bury and feasting. It is very expensive, Madam Speaker, to bury somebody today, especially if that person is a Luo. You have to budget. We do very huge budgets, Madam Speaker. It is unnecessary. So what we need to do, Madam Speaker, as leadership is let's champion other methods. And this is going to be very cost effective. Personally, Madam Speaker, I've told my family that if I die, I should be cremated. It is going to be very easy. There will be no expenses, etc. So, whereas we want to urge the Nairobi County and the government to look for other pieces of land for burials, personally, I think the option that we need to pursue is this other methods. It will be very good, cheap for us. And environmentally, I don't know if it is even better for us to be burying or be, cremating. We need to find out from some research if there are scientists in this house to tell us the impact of on the environment these burials that have happened in Langata Cemetery. I think it has some environmental impact on us. So should we find that these graves are environmental hazards, I think we need to abandon it. And so, whereas I support the motion as presented by the Honorable Jalango, we need to think outside the box and pursue other methods of burial. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Before we give the next member, allow me to recognize a delegation in the Speaker's Gallery, Machakos County University and Students Association from Machakos Town Constituency, Machakos County. On my own behalf, and as a product of student leadership, myself and many others in this house, allow me to welcome them to observe the proceedings of the house. The next member would be Honorable Farah Malim.
Excuse me. Yeah. Speaker, thank you very much. It's very interesting to to have a motion that discusses the state of our cemeteries in Nairobi. Whereas I appreciate the fact that we need to seriously respect the dead, the big question one needs to ask is that, is it the dead who are encroaching on the living, or is it the living who are encroaching on the dead? Honorable members, this place was planned very well by the colonialists. And in that planning, what's the problem?
Your time is up. Oh, go on.
Order. This place was very well planned. But there has been very ambitious development in the city itself. This city has expanded to something like 10 times what it was at independence. And I don't know whether we are trying to find dignity for the dead, or this is going to create a situation in which developers would see this as a very prime line and had to see a situation in which the cemetery itself is expanded. Because the cemetery is next to a forest, and the forest is big. And I have a feeling that it was invaded from both the north, and on the other side, of course, there's a freeway. Having said that, I still agree with what Honorable Ward is saying, that dignity has got to be there. The other thing is, why are we finding bodies out there? Is it because people have invaded the graves themselves to look for valuables, or the graves are shallow? I was reading the other day that in Oldoye Sabuk, the very famous historical settler Macmillan, who was, I think, a library named after him, his grave was raided and the body is no longer there. I don't know what to say about that. But I know of also what you call the grave thieves. So more than anything else, what we need to do is that we have to have a system in place of the national government in which the police, as a national government function, protect the dead. The citizens cannot protect the dead. And also to put down standards for graves. The graves have got to be at least 5 feet deep. They don't have to be shallow. Who makes them shallow? Is it the county government or the national government or the people of Kenya? No. The families who are going to dig, what do you call, bury the dead there, must be told that these graves have got to be a certain standard, and the standard itself has got to be regulated, and that regulation itself has got to be enforced. I can hear some people want to see a situation like when we introduce cremation. The Honorable Atandi, as much as cremation might appeal to you, but it is in line with the faith of the Hindu community, and I don't think cremation is anything that can be considered by Muslims and Christians and Jews for that matter, because this is what you call the Abrahamic faiths, the monotheism. We have to bury our dead somewhere, and they have to have a grave. So I think what we need to do is that we not only see it very simplistically and say that close this place. No, we can't close. If tomorrow I lose my relative, and I lose them every other day, and I lose my fellow religious men, where do I take them? Because the thing is closed. We don't have a situation of sending them to our home areas. That's not part of our culture. It's not our faith. It's actually the directive of the faith that the body should be buried the same day that the person deceases and becomes a body. You know, you are a name, first of all. You are Farah, you are War, you are Martha, you are John, you are Joseph. But the day you die, you cease to have a name. You become a body. So the body itself must be interred, in our case, immediately, the same day. It doesn't matter whether you come from Mandera or you come from Germany or you come from wherever. If I die in Germany myself, my body will not be brought back. I'll be buried in Germany. And the same applies to all Muslims all over the world. So we can't close that thing. And what I want to see is that, do we have a lot of land up there, and is there an encroachment by the developers? And why was that allowed in the first place? Why were developers allowed to encroach on the land that was set aside for the cemeteries from the colonial time? Why can the county government and the national government create a dignity for that? One, by having standards, and two, by making sure that this thing is protected. There are always people out there moving in the cemeteries, protecting the cemeteries. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. In my opinion, it's not so very simplistic. I do agree with the fact that burying the dead in Kenya for my Christian brothers and sisters is a very expensive thing. And somehow we all basically and we sympathize and empathize and see the problems that families suffer. A family that does not have the bare minimum, 3 square meals.
Your time is up. Honorable Ken Chonga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this motion by Honorable Jalango. Historically, Madam Speaker, we were told there are some communities which never used to bury the dead. Instead, they used to throw them in the bush. Then they're eaten by, I don't know, animals. Historically, we are hearing that. But what is happening today, world over, we know there are only 3 methods of burying. One is cremating, bury as we do, and Nairobi. If we look at Nairobi, we are in a cosmopolitan town where all communities live here. And the only respect that we give our departed souls is by burying. Madam Speaker, Langata Cemetery was declared full in 2008. By 2008, the county council was then supposed to have found alternative means as where people can be buried. But pathetically, as up to today, we are trooping back to Langata. Madam Speaker, allow me to use a word here. I don't know, it's a word or a term. I think greed is too much among our people, more especially our civil servants. Because by 2008, if this cemetery had already been declared full, honestly, something ought to have been done. And it is on record, Madam Speaker, in 2010, some almost $13 million was released to purchase a piece of land to extend the Langata Cemetery. It was alleged that 48 acres was bought, but it came out clear that it was a scam and it's only 10 acres which were procured. So, over 38 acres where we could be able to bury our people was taken away by people who were greedy to what have been allocated for the same. Madam Speaker, so much has been said. People will actually look at the issue of relocating Langata Cemetery to somewhere else differently, but it needs to be understood. For as long as a solution is not found, then we shall keep on punishing our dead ones. Madam Speaker, we bury in Langata because it's not because everybody wants to bury in Langata. You can imagine the cost of transporting a body from here to Kilifi. It is honestly cheaper to bury this person in Langata. We bury in Langata, Madam Speaker, because there are people who do not have anywhere else to bury their people apart from here. We bury here because you find there are some people who are totally homeless. That's the reason why we bury there. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of them are buried at Langata, and we have no alternative to that. Madam Speaker, time is up. This motion is timely. There is need for the county government to come up with a measure as soon as possible so that the dead can have the respect that they deserve wherever they go to lay. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, I stand and support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Embakasi North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving this opportunity also to contribute towards this motion. Madam Speaker, having been an elected member for 3 consecutive terms, I have also served in the City Council of Nairobi, formerly in the County of Nairobi, formerly City Council of Nairobi. And it is true, Madam Speaker, that back 2008, the City Council of Nairobi appropriated money to buy land for that particular purpose of gravesite. It's unfortunate, Madam Speaker, that corruption went away with all of what was appropriated to buy the grave. I want to be part of the members who have alluded that there was a misuse of funds, but it is true that actually after buying or buying that particular Mafoko grave, Madam Speaker, what happened is that those who planned and those who want to assess that particular land, there is one factor that was not done well, and this is the quality of that particular soil, because that soil is cotton soil, and cotton soil cannot go away along with burial, because what you do is that during the rainy season, after rain, then that casket is brought out by those heavy water, and therefore the land became unsuitable for burial. In this case, it's a case that has been ongoing, and you remember very well, members, that the former clerk of this of the City Council of Nairobi find his death in a jail after the verdict made by the court of law after the hearing of that particular case. In this case, Madam Speaker, I want to allude that Nairobi is a totally cosmopolitan, and there are those people who are who belongs in the city. Those has no anywhere else they can call home. Those people, Madam Speaker, must be taken care of, because they are not those that we can say that they migrated from Muranga, or they migrated from Osonga, or they migrated from elsewhere. They found themselves here, and they call themselves Nairobians. Those people are very important, and they are the people that we do represent. And Madam Speaker, it is
Honorable Kosing, you're totally out of order. You're totally out of order, and you know. Go to the bar and bow. Continue, Honorable.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's a long overdue that up to date, we have Langata Cemetery as the only option for burial to our departed friends. This is, to me, a route that has taken ages, and we must come to a stop where the county council, the county of Nairobi, should take it as a priority, and as a priority and appropriate money for that particular aspect, and do enough research. At any other site that may find soil, they must first do enough research to know whether the soil is adequate for this particular purpose, so that we cannot find ourselves in the same scenario that we find ourselves in 2008. And if that is done, Madam Speaker, it will go along with arresting our friends on a dignity place. The way the Langata the cemetery is of today, Madam Speaker, it is totally ironical. You cannot even dare to know how the situation it is. But we have no choice, and I cannot stand here to advocate that we close it because we have no alternative. And as I have alluded there before, those members who cause Nairobi their home have nowhere to bury their departed ones. And therefore, what I would ask is that both the national government and the county of Nairobi should hastily move on and make sure that actually there is already an alternative site where the RAD should be bought, and then we reserve for this particular purpose. And for that, Madam Speaker, I support.
Thank you. Member for Kwanza, Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi.
Madam Speaker, I want to take this opportunity, first and foremost, to thank our colleague, Chalang, for having come up with this particular motion. It's very, very embarrassing. I had buried a relative there. Madam Speaker, it's embarrassing. It's very painful that I think, Honorable Chalang, I think do something on that side for the time being. Even if it means building a concrete fence around the place, because as stated by the Honorable Member, wild animals actually get to the site, exhume particularly the fresh crabs, and feed on the date. We all know that we respect as Kenyans, as Africans, we respect the date. I buried a relative there who didn't have land up country. And what happened? We found the body was actually thrown out. First, because we have youths who go and remove the coffins. It was a very expensive coffin, and threw away because they have nothing to lose. So, Honorable Member, do something about it so that you can defend the area. First, maybe build a wall around it if we can. And if not, then of course we have to call the Minister for Health. That has nothing to do with the county government, because the county government is unable, unless we go to the Senate to force the county government to look for land. Otherwise, we are going to go around the whole thing, but we want to give you the shortest time possible, and we will support you to the last end to be able to get at least an alternative for this Langata Cemetery, which is a very, very old cemetery. Secondly, there are those actually who will want to bury and burn the date. That again is on African, as somebody has just mentioned. So I am saying that we should look for the money and come up with a budget. We look for the land around Nairobi. Even if it means getting 20 acres, Madam Speaker, to be able to look for alternative site to bury the dead. It's so inhuman. You go there and see yourself, particularly in the mornings. Madam Speaker, you will not even like to go back. The sight is unbelievable. If you are a human being, if you are an African like I am, you will never go back. And many, of course, most of the people being buried here have no land up country. It is true. Secondly, you want to help, like I've helped a few people to take the bodies up country. It's very expensive to go to where I come from, Trans Nzoia. You're not going to spend less than 200,000-300,000 shillings to get the body here, maybe with the relatives, what have you. And Nairobi is actually not just for people in Nairobi, it's a national city. So we all belong to this city. And therefore, I think the best again we can do, please come up, look for it, ask us, we'll be able to, some of us have been in Nairobi for this time, to be able to look for a good site, even if it means going as far as the Gong side, what have you, for Langata B. That is Langata A, Langata B, to be able to have our dead buried there. Madam Speaker, you know, you hear the stories, and as people are explaining, it is so certain that I think the alternative is to go the Asian way, which again is not African. Yeah, you burn when somebody's dead, you know, you burn the date. Again, that's not African. You'll be cast. I believe if I buried my grandson, whatever, here, instead of burying and burning the body, I think it will haunt me the whole year. It will haunt me the rest of my time. So therefore, Honorable Chalang, we are with you. Come up with a budget. Let's move to Langata B. I support your motion.
Thank you. Member for Mandera South.
Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And I will say from the word go that I fully support the motion by Honorable Felix Odior, member for Langata. And I'll particularly zero in on the prayers that are in that motion. where the honorable member is urging the national government through the Ministry of Health to urgently conduct an assessment of the public health risks posed by the continued use of Langata Cemetery and to institute mitigatory measures and collaborate with other stakeholders, including the Nairobi City Council government, to identify suitable alternative land for use as cemetery. That prayer, I think, is well put, it's timely and most welcome. The Langata Cemetery is actually, I think it's the largest cemetery in the country, and it's serving the entire Nairobi, all the constituencies in Nairobi. And I know particularly the Muslim people who are professing Muslim faith, they take most of their dead to Langata Cemetery for those who die in Nairobi for burial. And the question around overcrowding is a key thing. I agree with the honorable member who said it's a bit pathetic when you go bury your dead and you're stepping on the graves of other people's dead. You know, the question of decency and decent send-off of our beloved ones is a question which is very dear to our hearts. And this motion is coming at a time when, as a country and also as a city, we are dealing with increasing population. And although we have made a lot of gains in terms of health improvements of our people, we are also having an increase in mortality. And therefore, there is increasing need for land, and there is competing need for land between different competing land use, which burial being one of it. And therefore, we'll need more land for burial. And as one member put earlier, that land will not only be required for burying the dead, for just digging the graves. We'll need that land to also create some parking space for the people who come and bury their loved ones. We'll need some facilities, sanitation facilities in that land, and we'll need toilets, water facilities in that land. And therefore, there is demand for bigger land for burial in Nairobi, and particularly in Langata, which is the main burial site for the people who die in Nairobi. And therefore, I support this motion fully, and I thank once again the honourable member Felix Oduor for bringing this motion at this very timely time. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Member for Matuga.
Asante Madam Speaker kwa kunipatia fursa hii kuchangia kwa huu mswada muhimu, kwa sababu sote tunajua tulioko hai, na haya ni maneno ya Mwenyezi Mungu kwa sisi Waislamu. Kwa kitabu chetu kitukufu Quran kuna aya inayosema kwamba kulu nafsi dhaikatul maut, sote tutaionja mauti. Kwa hivyo ili sili swala la mjadala, na sote tunajua hasa kwa sisi Waislamu kwamba mtu anapokufa mambo manne lazima yafanyike, ikiwa kumwosha, kumvika sanda, kumsalia na hatimaye kumzika. Hili tulifahamu vizuri. Kumzika sio kumchoma kama vile wengine wanaozungumza. Kwa sisi ambao tuna imani thabiti ya dini, na hii na imani ni sote Waislamu na Wakristo, tunajua ukifa ima utaenda peponi ama utaenda motoni. Sasa hata ikiwa mmoja ana imani kwamba yeye ni mtu wa motoni, sioni haja ya kwamba aanze kuchomwa akiwa hapa. Hili pia ni jambo jingine ambalo linashangaza. Pengine mwenyewe unajua moja kwa moja utaenda motoni, lakini unatuambia tuanze ukuchomea hapa hata kabla uende ukamwone kabla siku ya hukumu. Hili ni jambo la kushangaza na halipo katika imani ya dini zote ambazo huwa zinatumika. Pengine wenzetu wa Hindi ama wale wanaotaka kuchomwa labda tayari wao hawaamini kwamba kuna njia nyingine isipokuwa tu kubaki motoni. Lakini kwa Mkristo na Muislamu hili ni jambo ambalo haliingia akilini. Kwa hivyo kuzika ni lazima. Langata na imani wakati ilipoanzishwa haikuanzishwa kwa watu wa Langata. Ilianzishwa wakati huo ikiwa Nairobi na imani ilikuwa na watu wachache. Mwaka wa 58 Nairobi ilikuwa na watu wachache, na imani ilipowekwa pale iliwekwa ikiwa pia ilikuwa mbali na mji, haikuwa katikati ya mji kama vile ilivyo. Iliwekwa pale sio kwamba ilikuwa ni constituency ya Lang'ata mwaka 58, iliwekwa kama sehemu ikiwa mbali na mji na wa Nairobi wote. Kwa hivyo mheshimiwa mbunge mwenzetu Jalango, ni jambo la kuhuzunisha kuona kwamba sehemu yake kubwa pia inatumika kwa wafu ambao moja kwa moja hawamsaidii kupiga kura. Wale walioko pale hawamsaidii, lakini kama watu wanavyochangia ni kwamba bado aendelee kupelekewa watu kuzikwa sehemu ile, na labda kuona ni vipi atasaidiwa. Mimi maoni yangu ni kwamba Nairobi hii, kila eneo bunge, kwa sababu Kenya hakuna mahali ambapo si eneo bunge, kila eneo bunge wakati county government ikianza kufikiria swala hili iweze kutengewa mahali kwake kwa kuzika watu, kwa sababu watu watazikwa. Na hali ya Nairobi ilivyo na tatizo la magari, ya msongamato ya magari, mimi nadhania mtu ambaye atakuwa ametoka sehemu za Kasarani na mahali pa kuzika peke yake ni Lang'ata, kitambo magari yatoke Kasarani kuja Lang'ata na msongamano wa magari, hilo ni huzuni hata kabla ya kufikiria kwamba umefiliwa na mtu wako. Kwa hivyo suluhisho, kila pembe ya Nairobi iweze kupata maeneo ya kuzika. Na hili pia isitoe nafasi kwa serikali ya ugatuzi ya Nairobi kama ilivyotokea wakati ule, kwamba sasa wao wamepata nafasi ya kupata mchongo pale ndani, kwa sababu tunajua ikiwa ni kuzika wafu unahitaji ardhi ambayo inafaa. Sielewi kwa nini wakati ule waliweza kununua shamba la mawe, ni kama ambapo ilikuwa watu wa Nairobi wanataka ujenzi wawe na mawe mengi, na ili hali ilikuwa ni sehemu ya kuzika watu. Kwa hivyo hili pia isiwe itakuwa imetoa nafasi ya kununua sehemu ambazo moja kwa moja tunajua kwamba hazitafaa, na ili hali tunajua kwamba Lang'ata ni mahali ambapo saa hizi kuweze kufungwa, kuweze kuhifadhiwa, na ile sehemu kama ipo uwezekano kitaalam uweze kufanywa marekebisho, watu waweze kuishi, watu wa Lang'ata waweze kuongezeka, watu wa Lang'ata waweze kuishi kwa hadhi ambayo itafaa. Mheshimiwa Spika, ninaunga mkono hoja hii. Asante kwa kunipa nafasi.
Thank you. Member for Kirinyaga Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I want to be on record supporting my brother, Mheshimiwa Jalango, for this timely motion. Mr. Speaker, where we come from, we normally say that death is an appointment that you cannot avoid. And Mr. Speaker, since I was born, I've never heard of anybody trying to plan and prepare for their death apart from the late Honorable Martin Shikuku, where he had even prepared his graveyard. Mr. Speaker, before I joined politics, was 2008, I remember there is a case that the former PS by the name Sam Kirui and others like John Gaku were jailed for 3 years for a certain cemetery of a misappropriation of 283 million, something like that. Mr. Speaker, I think it is the duty of this House to make a follow-up, because now that you are jailed for 3 years, and I remember John Gaku, the man, the town clerk who had planted a lot of trees around Nairobi, died in prison. What happened to the money, or what happened to that piece of land? Mr. Speaker, I would like to fault the Urban Planning Department of City of Nairobi, because, Mr. Speaker, if we are only approving housing, we are extending our roads, it means our population is still growing, Mr. Speaker. My question is, why aren't we planning for the dead? Because we need to give them dignities, Mr. Speaker. I was a victim. We were laying somebody very close to me in Lang'ata Cemetery. And Mr. Speaker, it's a bit worrying when you go there, because you are asked, what kind of grave do you want? Do you want the temporary one or the permanent one? The temporary one is where they can bury today, and you don't have any control. Mr. Speaker, because of what my brother Jarangos talked about, like a double allocation of graveyards. If you take a dead person to Langata and you bury them with a good coffin, Mr. Speaker, it is normally stored before the close of the day. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this is something that we need to follow up, so that, because Nairobi belongs to all of us, even if we come from rural constituencies, because we don't plan when we'll die, and anything can happen, and we ride in the same Langata, Mr. Speaker. I also want to echo the sentiments of our colleagues, Mr. Speaker, who have indicated that every constituency should have at least a cemetery where they can bury the dead. From where I come, Mr. Speaker, we have about 25 colonial villages. All these colonial villages do not have anywhere for cemetery, Mr. Speaker. So if we were to segment per each constituency to have a common cemetery, Mr. Speaker, I think we'll be sorting out this problem, and I will urge my brother Honorable Jarango, that because of bringing this timely motion, he should sit with the governor of Nairobi. They see how they can have a chat and talk about it. And because of bringing this motion, Mr. Jarango, as much as I'm not the appointing authority, I would say that your sins have been forgiven and do not be called for those things in ODM. I support.
Honorable Jalango, don't be fooled. He doesn't speak for the ODM. Member for Super South.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to add my voice to this motion. I was actually supposed to second it, but I was delayed somewhere, so my apologies to Mheshimiwa Jalango. Something always captures my mind when it comes to deaths and the way we as Africans relate to it. I think there's a lot of mystique or mysticism associated with death. Yet I see it simply as a natural biological process. But we tend to get into a certain state of mind when we experience death that even our rationality may become questionable. But on the economic side, I think the poor get to be the most affected when we suffer death. If you attend a rich man's funeral, it may be elegant, but if you look at the expenses involved, they tend to be very manageable, as opposed to a poor man's funeral, which tends to be very expensive. With respect to this particular motion, I think it is timely and we should support it. Though I also understand that the issue of managing cemeteries is a devolved function. But I think for Nairobi, being the capital city and being the pace setter, this House should take a keen interest, and the national government as well, and see how to support Nairobi County government in getting additional land for proper cemetery. Cemeteries, if you go to a lot of cities, just are not burial sites. Some of them are tourist attractions, actually. Yeah. In many, many countries, you go and you find cemeteries where heroes are buried, where famous people are buried. If you go to Arlington National Cemetery in US, a lot of tourists visit it to see the grounds where the Kennedy family and the rest of other people are buried. They also serve as national archives and family memorials, but also historical sites. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to encourage the population, all of us, that we begin to think differently about burials. My community, the Luo Nation, I've recently been informed, spends about 20 billion a year on funerals, both on transportation and food and the rest of it. I don't know whether that is sustainable. Lawyers probably spend more. But 20 billion a year on funerals is quite an expense. I think we should discourage individual home-based burials, where you have separate burials because of the present land titling system that we have, and instead encourage homesteads to have cemeteries within the homesteads as opposed to individual burial sites. I think it is also important that we encourage probably the administrative units, be they sub-locations or locations, or even churches, to have burial grounds for members who live around there. And for Nairobi City County government, I think they should also consider, when they have a new burial site, a new cemetery, when they acquire new land for new cemetery, they should consider licensing multi-storied tombs. If you go to Louisiana, in New Orleans, in the United States, you will find tombs Zagorofa, multi-storied. So the newly dead are put in coffins at the lower levels. After a while, there's a cleaning process of the bones. They are packed, they are put to the next level, like that, like that. So if you go to New Orleans and have visited those cemeteries, you'll find a family from 1860, from the Civil War to present, with one tomb with all their names. I think we should consider that. And I think we should also encourage the devolved units, including Nairobi City Council, county government, to consider licensing entrepreneurs to establish private cemeteries. And finally, let me encourage the general population to consider alternative methods of disposing of the dead bodies: cremation, donating our bodies to science, and those other methods that will make this thing affordable to everybody. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support the motion.
Thank you. I'm not able to see the member for Mandera West. The member for Kitui East. Where do they go? The member for Marakwet West.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to address this matter. Honorable Speaker, I wish to thank the Honorable Member from Langata, Mheshimiwa Felix Oduor, for this very, very, very important motion that he has brought before the floor of this House. Honorable Speaker, it is unfortunate, and look at the substance of the motion. It has been said that Langata Cemetery was declared fully utilized 2 decades ago. Honorable Speaker, meaning that 20 years ago, this cemetery was declared fully utilized, and the same is being used currently to bury dead people. Honorable Speaker, in this country, we have failed to plan. And Honorable Speaker, a country that fails to plan plans to fail. Honorable Speaker, this plan was set up during the colonial period, and it was, Langata Cemetery was set up in proportionate to the population of Nairobi at that particular time. But the population of Nairobi has since increased significantly. Honorable Speaker, so therefore, there is need, absolutely, to set aside a section of this city so that we can be able to respect the wishes of the dead people. Honorable Speaker, that begs the question. Under Article 26 of the Constitution, there is a right to life. But the question is, do those rights extend to dead people? Honorable Speaker, reading Article 20, reading our article, Honorable Speaker, it provides that every citizen is entitled to a Kenyan passport and documents of registration or identification issued by the state or to the citizen. Honorable Speaker, upon death, every dead person in Kenya, Honorable Speaker, is issued with a death certificate, meaning that the state recognizes that there once lived a certain person. And even the dead person, Honorable Speaker, in this country is entitled to human dignity and respect, so that that person is interred with a lot of respect. So, Honorable Speaker, I support this motion to the extent that even a dead person is entitled to human dignity and protection as provided for in the Constitution. Honorable Speaker, this matter also deals with the issue of health. Health is devolved, and we have a right as a country to take care of a person who is born up to the very end. Honorable Speaker, I know that a dead person in this country is not entitled to inherit property, but is entitled to equal protection of law, even upon death. Honorable Speaker, I call upon the county governments. The county governments in this country are independent. And for that reason, I call upon the county assemblies to enact legislations, to provide, to set up motions before the House, before the county assemblies. Honorable Speaker, I call upon the county governments, the county assemblies, to pass house resolutions so that it becomes mandatory for them to set up cemeteries. Honorable Speaker, this matter raised by Honorable Jalango here, Honorable Felix Oduor, is a representation of what is happening in the entire country. In Eldoret, we have a cemetery known as Kiplombe. That cemetery is full. Honorable Speaker, it is time that we, as a country, we look at the rights of even those who are dead so that they can be respected posthumously. Honorable Speaker, thank you.
Member for Narok North.
Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support my brother Jalango, because I think it is important for us as Kenyans to have a place where we can bury our relatives or our parents, our loved ones. Because there are 2 days that are very important, the day you come to this world and the day you go. And when you come to this world, you'll also want to own land. And the government and everybody and the law gives you the right to own land. And when you are leaving, you are issued with a certificate, a death certificate, and of course, it means you'll be put somewhere. And for the loved ones, I think it can be very bad if you bury your father today or your son, and then tomorrow you move around and find that the animals have removed the body, and here he is. You will really feel bad. So I think it is important for the county governments to look for money and look for land, to set aside land where we can be burying our loved ones. Because you know you love your daughter or your relative when he's alive. But after he has died, he turns to be something else. You cannot stay with that person in your house. And even if you stay with him, for how long are you going to be with him? And again, some cultures cannot allow you to say that the body will be burned because you'll never forget your loved ones. Because if you don't belong to the churches or the beliefs of burning somebody after death, then you will want to give your people or your relatives or your loved ones a decent burial. For that reason, I support my brother in saying that we need to set aside land that we can be burying people. Because there are few people who have land to bury their own people. It's only maybe in rural areas, like where I come from, we still have land. But when you go to the towns, there are so many people who are in towns, and even in Narok North, we will soon not have a place to bury our people. So I think it has come at the right time, and there is need, and it is important that the county governments set aside money and look for land that we can be burying our loved ones. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable members, the time allotted for this motion is spent. I would therefore now call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and also want to thank every single member that has contributed to this motion. And before we close down, let me donate to Honorable Tim Wanyonyi, member of Westlands, because ako hapa Nairobi, is from here Nairobi, and understand this issue. Then we'll have...
The Honorable Kodo, you have 5 minutes, so you tell us how much you're giving to Honorable Wanyonyi.
2 minutes, 1 minute to Wangwe,
then that's it.
And Caleb too. Tafadhali. Caleb Amisi.
That means that when they finish, you won't say a thing yourself.
Because I'll have 1 minute left.
You won't have any. Go ahead, Honorable Wanyonyi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I would like to contribute to this motion. Honorable Speaker, when I was a councillor at Nairobi City Council, we set aside money to buy a cemetery, an alternative cemetery, and some people embezzled that fund. I believe the county government now has a duty and a moral duty for that matter to set aside money and buy a new site for a cemetery. Mr. Speaker, the Langata Cemetery right now if it's even invested with the criminals. People, you can't bury and people come and exhume the bodies and steal some of those things that have been used to bury the person, their coffin, the clothes and all that. So it is better that we give our loved ones a decent burial and be at peace, that they are resting in peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Who was next? That was...
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to salute my colleague, the Honorable Jalas, for these wonderful thoughts. It's good to think for those who cannot think for themselves, those who cannot say a voice for themselves. Honorable Dwar, that was great that you thought wise on behalf of those people who could not speak as lying as dead. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, why am I supporting this bill, this motion? It's because, Honorable Speaker, when you are dead, you cannot talk, but you have a right, Honorable Speaker, within the provisions of the Constitution, that your life has to be, your immortal status has to be protected. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, many a times abuse of the dead should not be contained. And Honorable Speaker, it will be good that we think and invest on behalf of those who cannot be heard, those who cannot say anything. And in any case, Honorable Speaker, those who might have spent the money wrongly at that time when the budgets were done should now come out very clearly and say, this is the route to go. Because after all of us are just on the same journey like those who have left.
Honorable Hamisi.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I want to thank Honorable Jalas for giving me an opportunity as well as for his very timely motion. Jalango, you know, is my...
Order, what?
Yes.
Who is Honorable Jalas?
Honorable Speaker, I want to thank Honorable Felix Odiwar, MP for Langata. He is my very good friend, not just my good friend, he's actually my area member of parliament, as well as my former voter in Saboti before he shifted. And we share a lot. I want to contribute to this motion and want to say this. Langata Cemetery was started in 1958. And that was before we gained independence as a country. So you can imagine this is a cemetery that was started by the colonialists. Their intention, of course, was well informed. And at that particular time in history of this country, the population was not as it is. This is a menace that has been created partly by urbanization, which has increased the population of the people in Nairobi, and mostly people have come to seek fortune in this town. They end up becoming, total residents, and eventually, when their demise, they are buried there. So it is paramount that at this juncture we try and restructure that cemetery in terms of increasing the acreage, because 20 years the place was declared full. And a number of suggestions in terms of more allocation.
Honorable Miss, your time is up. You only had 1 minute, actually. Honorable Jalango, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, once again, and to every single member who's contributed to this timely motion. We hope that we could have the Governor Nairobi be brought into this House, because even in their budget this year, this financial year, they did not allocate any money for the maintenance or procurement of any other space as a burial alternative. I want to just say thank you to every single member, and may God bless all of you. Asante.
Say, honorable member, when you're playing, say you beg to reply.
I beg to reply.
Thank you. Members will not put the question on that particular motion for obvious reasons. So I'll call for the next order.
Order number 12, motion. Development and implementation of a program for voluntary regularization of land occupied by squatters for a prescribed period.
Honorable Mark Mwenje.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to move that aware that lack of access to ownership of productive assets, in particular to land, is one of the very serious sources of economic and social insecurity for Kenyans. Further aware that many communities, particularly in rural areas and informal settlements in urban areas, depend on land for their production and livelihood, and therefore landlessness affects their ability to secure basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. Concerned that for the urban low-income dwellers, the only way of accessing land to put up their dwellings has been to take up residence on land that is unfit for human habitation. Aware that the Bill of Rights in Chapter 4 of the Constitution guarantees every citizen the right to adequate housing and reasonable standards of sanitation, noting that there are many squatters that have settled on land that belongs to either absentee landlords and adjudicated land, public land, or community land for long periods of time, with some disputed, with others undisputed, concerned that the issue of land settlement in many urban areas, particularly in the informal settlements, has remained unresolved, with numerous persons remaining squatters. Further aware that Section 7 of the Limitation of Actions Act 2010 provides for the right to claim for settlement on certain land after the prescribed period, recognizing the need for the Ministry of Lands to hasten the process of identifying parcels of land occupied by squatters where there are no disputes from any parties. This House resolves that the government develops and implements a policy for voluntary regularization of land occupied by squatters for a prescribed period, including negotiations for financial settlements across the country to address the challenges facing the said squatters. Honorable Speaker, this motion, to summarize, is purely about regularization. Honorable Speaker, let us look at the value of land. It is the golden child of investment in this country. When our forebears fought for independence, they were fighting for land and self-rule. That was the main issue. Wealth in our country is attached to land. We all know it. And it secures livelihoods. And we must look, why does land evoke such emotions in our country? Because it's a measure of wealth. I'm presenting the motion, Honorable Speaker. I wonder why, don't know.
Honorable Ndikiri, what's out of order?
The motion is supposed to lead us as it is, and thereafter, then we can tender.
What is out of order?
Because he's debating.
That's what he did. The motion is his. He has done the right thing. He has presented the motion and is now moving the motion. That's how it's done. Resume your
I
seat.
stand corrected.
Resume your seat, Honorable Ndikiri. Go ahead, Honorable Mwenje. Don't allow Honorable Kirima to keep misleading.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I think the Honorable Ndikiri is just taking a jibe at me. And I'm just presenting the motion into context to allow for debate.
It can't be allowed to bully you at all.
Honorable Speaker, land it secures, it's all about food security. It causes conflicts between communities. It gives communities identity. And for us as Africans, land is all about personhood and giving us our full humanity as an African. Honorable Speaker, allow me to just note some points from the National Land Policy of 2009, a document that has been brought before this House, that it provides that the National Land Policy is supposed to guide the country towards efficient, sustainable, and equitable use of land for prosperity and posterity. The overall objective of the land policy is to secure rights over land and provide sustainable growth, investment, reduction of property. Those are the issues that have been highlighted in this policy, Honorable Speaker. And all citizens must have the opportunity to occupy land, to do economically viable projects on this land, and we need efficient and effective operation of land markets and transparent land dispute resolution mechanisms, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the issue of informal settlements, The national policy states, and I quote, "The essence of informal or spontaneous or squatter settlements is the absence of security and tenure of planning." Honorable Speaker, this same land policy, in order to address the challenges of informal settlement, has said we take an inventory of the genuine squatters, determine the land occupied by these squatters, establish appropriate mechanisms for removal of squatters and their subsequent resettlement, planning for land and finding that is found to be suitable for human settlement, ensure that informal settlement is developed in an orderly manner. Honorable Speaker, I want to emphasize on the three next points under this national land policy. Facilitate negotiation between private owners and squatters in cases of squatter settlements found on private land. Another point under the national land policy is facilitate the regularization of existing squatter settlements found on public and community land for purposes of upgrading development. And another key one, establish a legal framework and procedures for transferring unutilized land belonging to absentee landowners to squatters and people living in informal settlements. Honorable Speaker, this motion, I brought it because 40% of land is unadjudicated. The government hasn't come up with a regularization plan. And sometime, Honorable Speaker, I hope to bring a bill that will substantively deal with this issue, Honorable Speaker. There are over 1 million who are residing on land that either belongs to absentee landlords or unadjudicated land, public land, or community land. It is also worth noting that there are settlements where the occupants and the owners of the title have ongoing disputes, and there is room for negotiation to discuss some of these matters, Honorable Speaker. There are court orders that cannot be implemented. You cannot evict some of these people. They've stayed there for years. The demolitions that have been done have been inhumane. Honorable Speaker, we talk about inadequate housing, and yet we want to demolish, and our failure to regularize it will lead to that inadequate housing, especially for us in Nairobi. It has given conmen the advantage of the chance to con people who are trying to get the title deeds of some of this land, and the use of that land has been ineffective. Honorable Speaker, this motion shall have some benefits, Honorable Speaker. The government shall be able to issue more titles, create wealth. We shall have tripartite regularization, where you have the owner, the occupant, and the government to check that that has been done properly. County shall collect more rates, Honorable Speaker. The government shall be able to collect more taxes. We shall sort the issue of housing. We shall prevent uncontrolled development, Honorable Speaker. Sewage and water, Honorable Speaker, which is a problem for us in Nairobi. We shall be able to sort that out under this motion once passed. We shall stop demolitions. And Honorable Speaker, the President himself guaranteed that he does not want to see demolitions. Let us not forget how it was in 2016, 2017 to 2018, when we saw all manners of demolitions going on, especially in the Eastlands area. This must come to an end, Honorable Speaker. It shall discourage land invasion, because this is for a prescribed period, and people will know there's nothing for free, Honorable Speaker. We shall be able to do roads. New towns shall come up. Public utilities and schools and hospitals will be provided for, because as long as we are regularizing, we must provide for the public utilities that are required, Honorable Speaker. And we shall be able to reduce the court workload and encourage out-of-court settlements, Honorable Speaker. So, Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, demolitions, which is one of the issues that plagues our country here in Nairobi, have led to loss of life and property. We have a chance to stop that with this motion, Honorable Speaker. The court cases are there. They've been there for 20, 30, 40 years, and they will never recover that land, Honorable Speaker. One court order that I saw, the police requested, in order to do the demolitions, they need 3,000 police officers to be able to evict close to 20,000 people. It is impossible. It will never happen. But we have a chance here through regularization to sort that issue, Honorable Speaker. We must be brave to face this problem. Let us not postpone this problem. Every government that has come before has postponed this problem. Honorable Speaker, I have a ward in Molem where 60% is land that is unadjudicated, yet it is one of the most populous wards in this city, in Nairobi. I have a ward called Karubangi South. I have another village called Alexin that we need them regularized and given their title, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, Embakasi West constituency, Embakasi constituency, Honorable Speaker, and I'm hoping you'll add me some 3 minutes, Honorable Speaker, as I conclude. That,
seconds, member.
Honorable Speaker, I just need to emphasize this point, that the late Embakasi gave birth to 6 constituencies, courtesy of the late Moshiri, Maori Moshiri, the late Mwenje, and Waitito. We need to solve these issues, Honorable Speaker. We sought the land problems once and for all. The President promised to support.
Can conclude.
Honorable Speaker, as I conclude, we are looking for a win-win solution for everyone. That is the purpose of this motion. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move, and I ask the Honorable Maungu to second this motion. Thank you.
Honorable Maungu.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity that I have this morning to second this all-important motion on regularization of land in this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, land is a very emotive matter and a very emotive subject in this country because year in, year out, Mr. Speaker, we have experienced cases where demolitions have happened, causing people to be homeless, at times maiming, at times even killing people, Mr. Speaker, because there has been some contestation on matters land, Mr. Speaker. It is true that we may need to have a policy that will regularize